Hey guys, Mr. Tier List here. So today we do have a very interesting little tier list for you guys today, and that is ranking every Honkai Star Rail's boss designs, combat mechanics, and overall vibes on a respectable tier from the HSR community, and that is basically myself because I am the HSR community, right? So the criteria for ranking is honestly super simple. It will be based on 3 different criteria: how well they look, right? The overall graphics, the designs, right? The texture, right? The combat, the mechanics for each of these bosses and how they interact with you, as well as the vibes, right? So these will be the 3 main criterias. All of these are once again going to be my personal opinion, so please do not cancel one another. And starting off with our version 1 boss, that is gonna be Doomsday Beast. Doomsday Beast as our very first boss, I'ma give this guy a very solid tier 1. Classic, timeless, standard, and okay, Ogre Cabo, you need to calm down a little bit, right? Back to the question right here, and that is gonna be Doomsday Beast. It is gonna be our tier 1 boss, classic, timeless, and the first ever boss that I've ever seen Well Gang putting any relevance to the story, as he single-handedly stopped us from going Bufflet Explode. So I do really appreciate this little boss. Also, fun fact, back in those days of version 1, if you guys remember Doomsday Beast, people were doing damage per screenshot with Doomsday Beast because on his very first break, he gets a insane damage increase buff. So you could see shit doing like 10 million damage on a version 1.0 team, which was super interesting. So that is gonna be a pretty interesting mechanic back in those days. Nowadays, it's like nobody really cares anymore, right? Japart. I personally don't really mind Japart as a boss. The most scary part of this mechanic back then is that he actually deals a lot of damage. I'm not talking about the Japart that you see with Kokoda nowadays, but back when Japart was actually a boss, when our sustain capabilities were like quite low, he could actually wipe your team on, I believe, his second full AoE blast. So if you didn't have units like Fu Xuan or your own Japart with a shield or like any prop, like if you were using like a 4-star sustain, you're probably getting wiped, right? So Japart was a pretty scary ass beefy boss. So I don't really think there's actually any ways to interact with this particular mechanic back in version 1, because it's either you break him fast enough or you kill him fast enough. Then besides that, it is a raw sustain check. So because of the lack of interactability, as well as pretty much a raw stat check for either your damage or sustain, I'm gonna have to put this at tier 2, right? It's just not a very fun boss to begin with, so that's gonna be that. Okay, Bronya. Bronya is... I believe you usually only see Bronya with Kokolia. I don't think Bronya ever had a standalone boss. Correct me if I'm wrong. She usually always spawns with Kokolia. I know there was like back in those days, there was like a Memory of Chaos where like you see a Kokolia in phase 1, then after she died, you have a Bronya spawning on the next phase, right? Then sometimes I believe in another Memory of Chaos, you had both Kokolia and Bronya happening at the same time, which was, I believe, on Dahlia's patch. So if you did not have Dahlia, Kokolia and Bronya was weakness locked. So that was pretty much to sell Dahlia for the super big base. I will rank them both together hand in hand. I don't know if she was a solo boss. I legitimately can't remember, but I'm just gonna rate them both together. This boss, I think it was quite okay. Kokolia was a more memorable boss though, right? Because she is the face of what... Okay, we're not gonna talk about this just yet. She is the face of Wildfire, right? She had the Bufflet explode and she could summon the different ice pillars, which you could pray for the freeze RNG or just getting additional energy from getting hit by the ice pillars. I don't really feel she was super scary because the wind up time for her letting go of that burst was actually pretty considerable. So I would say it is a much more fun boss overall. Then Bronya is basically her summon, which kind of just comes and goes. I mean, she does have the additional turn, which could be super scary, especially in SU. And I also remember back in those days, if you were a DOT main with Kafka playing the healer team and you faced up against Cocolia plus Bronya, she instantly cleanses all debuffs, so you just go fuck yourselves, which was a general rule of thumb that you should never ever fight this boss as a DOT main. Oh my god, bro, chat. Ranking this tier list just gave me back insane nostalgia back in those days, where we were not just talking about Zero Cycles, but actually playing the game in Memory of Chaos and simulated universe, right? So pretty good times back then, so that is gonna be my overall rating. Okay, I like Sarok, bro, because Sarok gave me some core memories when I was playing Goryo. Most notably, right, one of till this day my core memories of Sarok was when Jing Yuan was about to kill his fuck ass. Lightning Lord was literally about to go, and then he yoinks Jing Yuan. And then after he yoinks Jing Yuan, Lightning Lord went all the way back to the start of finish line as if bro does not exist, right? And because of this fuck-ass boss, it was the entire reason why I made the Jing Yuan issues way back in those days, which is also why Jing Yuan mains hated my ass, because I called out their favorite DPS being an absolute fucking useless dog shit that you cannot ever get rid of that mechanic at all. If Jing Yuan gets yoinked right before Lightning Lord, you basically just cry, right? And till this day, I have not been corrected at all because I was always absolutely fucking right. So thank you, Sarok, for opening my eyes to how fun you were as a boss and the intrinsic weaknesses of a backloader DPS like Mr. Jing Yuan, right? So really nice boss. But other than that, besides the yoink, he also had quite a lot of like free energy, right? He summons the little goons and he has the little rocket, which gives you a lot of energy. And one thing I've noticed with HSR's boss design is that any boss that gives you energy is inherently a pretty fun boss. Because a lot of units in this game, they're always tied to having ultimates, right? Which is why units like Ligus is like super fun, because you could see some crazy interactions with the free double 100% ultimate charge. Which is also why Argenti in this current rotation, you could do a 4000 AV clear with the power of Evanesia Ranmei as well as Ting Yun to slap on in the instant 100% ultimate charge for this Epoch Shadow rotation, right? So anything involving energy is just a overall fun mechanic that I personally enjoy, much more compared to like, for example, Action Value, right? So that is just gonna be me. Okay, so this is basically the same person. That's it. Alright, Kafka. Ooh. Okay, this boss, I would say it is a, let me zoom this in a little bit. This was the first time that ever made me like using Huan Huan. Because if you had Huan Huan, it is literally a free turn, right? When she mind controls, it's instant action very advanced, but cleansing that would immediately give you free turn. So it was night and day between a player with Huan Huan or without Huan Huan. That being said, we didn't really have a very consistent way of getting rid of a debuff preemptively. So for example, one way you could like, for example, cleanse this, right, is to slice in between a cleanse right before that mind controlled unit takes action. So like your Gallagher ultimates, right, you can cut in between Kafka or maybe even a Natasha ultimate, because Natasha ultimate could actually cleanse. Generally, I didn't really like that too much because it's just the mind control mechanic that has some pretty interesting moments. So I'll put this slightly lower than Bronya, as well as the Coco, or rather, okay, actually, you know what, higher than Bronya. Right, around the same caliber as Doomsday Beast, right, for a timeless boss. Okay, fuck this guy. Alright, I absolutely, if I could give this a tier 3, I would, but honestly, this boss in pure fiction was quite fun. Because we had our access to the first ever infinite loop on Himeko when Fugue first came out. It was with Ebondir. But other than pure fiction, oh my god, bro, this guy is just... I think when I was in a day 1 early HSR player phase in SU, this was the only boss that literally scared me. So if I had to fight Ebondir back then, it physically scared me because any wrong move, if he's used that charge up ability and you cannot get rid of the little trees, he straight up one-shots your entire team. And there was nothing I could have fucking done, so I absolutely fucking hate this boss. And also the little branches, right? You had the outrage, you had the heals, you had all of them different debuffs, and our toolkit back in those days, it was not advanced enough to deal with Ebondir. Nowadays, if bro spawns, nobody fucking cares. Right? Nobody fucking cares, right? But for a version 1 boss, this was super annoying, so that's gonna be that. Okay, Yanqing. I like this boss. It was pretty alright. It was a bit of like a gambling mechanic where he had to summon the little tiny swords. And as long as you hit the right weakness, you were able to break the sword and you can enhance your damage and deal toughness bar, right? So it reminded me of a day back in Goryo where elements actually matter. Nowadays, I don't even think elements matter at all because half the roster in this game has element ignore and the other half just doesn't give a flying fuck about element whatsoever. You can just brute force, right? So for a mechanic back in those days where you didn't really have access to the right elements, Yanqing was definitely a little bit more annoying. But on top of that, he also had access to, you know, quite a lot of AoE, quite a lot of free energy. The freeze was slightly annoying, but not unmanageable as long as you have the corresponding elements to deal with the swords, right? So I kind of like this as long as you had the right elements. If you didn't, then flip explode. Okay, I honestly super enjoy Fantilia's boss design. In fact, I believe this is my second favorite boss design in the entire game because she is the first time we are exposed to a giantess, right? And a giantess nowadays is very nice for me personally speaking. But besides the giantess thing, she was essentially able to summon the little flowers. Then you can choose whether you want to play her as a break DPS or a crit DPS, because one of the flowers gave you damage buff, one of the flowers gave you break effect buff, right? So in Epoch Shadows, I think she was not too shabby. I've never faced her in MOC or Anomaly Arbitration or Pure Fusion, but specifically in Epoch, I think she was quite enjoyable, especially if you're gonna be doing some interesting sustainers break teams over there. But the number one reason why she's tier 0 is going to be a giantess, right? Okay, this is a timeless boss. I would say almost everyone in HSR will recognize this boss because I think he has the highest amount of appearance in every single endgame content. You saw him in Pure Fiction, you saw him in your SU, you saw him in MOC, and he appeared so many times. So if you play HSR long enough, you would have probably faced this guy at least once. For me personally, I really like this boss because it reminded me of a time back then where you could zero cycle with Scylla. Because his mechanic was summoning the tiny bugs. And if you kill the tiny bugs, you apply a vulnerability. A little bit similar to the blue bug, but it's not as annoying as a blue bug. Because this guy doesn't have the toughness of mechanic, right? So as long as you can repeatedly clear the tiny bugs to apply more vulnerability, then you can let go of one big boom against the main boss itself. This was also the boss that reminded me that D Herta could zero cycle with her E0 S0 S because we have a lot of D Herta showcase specifically for this bug itself. So purely based off of nostalgia, I really like True Sting and definitely a timeless boss if I can say so myself. I'm gonna keep it a buck. I don't know what the fuck this guy does. Like you could literally erase this guy from existence and I would notice zero impact. Because I believe this boss design, it was like a pre-alpha to Pure Fiction. That's it. Also to shield Argenti. I believe he was released around the Argenti patch, and if this boss did not exist in MOC for Argenti, Argenti would debut as a tier 3 unit. Right, but because of this little buckle, Argenti could be like, oh my god, wow, Argenti is so good because wow, there's like full AoE and like he was doing so well and you could use him pure fiction. But fast forward, I just, who is bro, right? So the end, never saw him again, tier 3. I feel like this guy is a bit of a half and half. So I'll put this here. One half is if you can play into his mechanics with the right units, you can bypass a lot of phases, right? You can bypass the summons, you can break it immediately, and you can deal a ridiculous amount of damage. But the other half is, if you don't have the number of attacks, he has a lot of invincibility. Alright, like the little traffic-like shield, which is something that can even stop an Aircon ultimate because of all of his spots. So it really depends on what kind of units you have against this guy. If you do not have the right units, I don't really like it. But if you have the right units, I think this guy was pretty fun. You know what? Yeah, exactly. This boss was more fun than our playable unit. So thank you, Argenti. That was a pretty interesting development. Okay. I have to give this at the bottom of tier 1. I think he is kind of like True Sting, but just a lot more restrictive. Except for that one anomaly arbitration quite recently with M-Blade, where he instantly made Acheron tier 0. Because every single bug that died, he had a debuff. And then you have like 5 billion Acheron ultimates. And then you can just do like insane amount of damage. But except for this one time, he is just not a very fun boss. Because you are forced to either kill him or break him fast enough before he summons his bugs, which will lock his toughness bar, or you just waste an insane amount of action value. So it's a very one-dimensional boss that is kind of like a damage check, probably around the same caliber as Ebon Deer, but at least I never saw this boss in like a too unfavorable matchup for now. I could still clear him every single time, so it was not as difficult as compared to this guy because we have more tools dealing with Scarab Bears nowadays. But even so, I don't really like his mechanics, so I will be putting him at the bottom of tier 1. Ooh, I like this boss because he also has the mechanic of full team-wide energy regeneration, no questions asked, at the second phase. The moment you break phase 1, boom, everybody gets max energy. So it led to a lot of very interesting plays. Also, he killed Firefly. Killed. Alright, so when I saw him for the first time in the story, I think this was one of the most impressionable bosses that we have ever met as a casual HSR player. Actually, you know what? Fuck it. Tip top of tier 0.5, right? So thank you for your service, Mr. Something Unto Death, and I will look forward to seeing him back in Memory of Chaos one fine day, right? Thank you. Ooh. I think nowadays, Sam is not that bad now. But back then, he was pretty annoying because he had a lot of beefiness for the units that we had available. It was either DHPT or rather Dale or nothing. You couldn't really even use QQ and you just have to burn off as much skill points as possible. But with the inclusion of Archer, he is like a lot more manageable. As a matter of fact, even without Archer, even though he has toughness lock, you could bypass that shit with your Dahlia as well. So more manageable now, but back in the earlier days, he was just a super fatty fat fuck. Alright, just an immovable wall. He didn't really deal as much damage, right? You didn't really take that much, but he just don't die. But now that we have Archer, I think he is a lot more manageable, right? So that, okay, fuck this guy. Probably one of the most annoying dogshit fuck ass boss I've ever seen, because you either skipped his phase 2 entirely, or you are gonna be in a perpetual loop with the dice for the next 10 billion cycles, right? It was super fucking annoying. It's like if there is a boss in Genshin Impact that flies around, You know those dragons that flies around and never land, so you have to waste 10,000 years to wait for the guy to stand on the ground, then you can actually deal damage. Okay, eventually will be the equivalent in Goryo, right? If you didn't have enough hits to deal with the dices, you straight up just don't deal any damage to him. Right? Complete waste of fucking time, waste of space, waste of existence. Fuck this, fuck it. And he has energy drain. So any bosses with energy drain, I just really dislike that shit. So this is gonna be the bottom of the tier 2, right? So that is gonna be that. Alright, and apparently this was the first boss in the entire HSR universe that had nerfed, because the casual HSR community, notably from TikTok, literally could not clear him in the story. So for the first ever time in HSR history, they nerfed this story boss so that the casuals could actually progress in a Hoyoverse story game, right? So absolutely fucking ridiculous. So thank you, Adventuring, for setting this present. I think Papa is alright. Nothing notable, not too bad. Very, very easy if you have break. So if you're a break slop enjoyer back then, I don't even think you'll memorize this boss at all. But if you don't play break, it will probably be a little bit annoying, especially the sleeping guy. But also nothing too crazy. So I'll just put him tier 1, right? Just not very impressionable, generally speaking. Alright, Sunday. Purely for his music, I will put it above Kokoda. I had more hype and enjoyment for the Panel Coney Sunday boss compared to Kokoda's Wildfire. I don't know why people glaze Wildfire. Maybe they deserve it, maybe they don't. I think Sunday's moment when Babin starts singing and Panakani's Lars Discord, right? Lars Disharmony, and then Pom Pom rams the train into Sunday. It was way, way, way better than a stupid ass fucking MILF that wanted to destroy the entire planet. So that is just my personal opinion, right? So that is from the story part. For the actual combat, I think it's fine, because I remember Sunday's Anomaly Arbitration. We had a lot of different ways to actually get rid of Bako, even if you did not play any break DPS. So overall, I really like this boss, but mainly just for the story, right? That was a really, really nice little moment right there. Okay, Hule, I fucking love Hule. Because you either get zero cycled by Hule or you zero cycle Hule. Super, super interesting boss because he hits you so frequently, which means you get a lot of energy. And the entire mechanic of this fight, it makes me feel like I am gonna be in a little bit of a life or death kind of situation. And not in a bad way, as in you can't deal anything to this guy. But his entire fight just feels nice to play, right? When he summons the Horizons, right? When he enters into the ragey state. And then when he casts his own ultimate doing the big hits, like whoa, like what's gonna happen? Or if you do have, especially if you had, for example, Adventuring, this boss was super, super nice. And I remember there was a lot of like fun little zero cycles have Hule, because this was one of the first few bosses. I was like, holy shit, Fei Xiao is absolutely fucking insane against this guy, which is kind of ironic because he's the Horizon and Fei Xiao is the slave and everything. So super nice boss. W Fei Xiao, W full up attack team. Okay, this boss, I like this boss, but I can't really place it that high because I feel it's a very easy boss as long as you read. If you read when to hit, what to hit, it was one of the easiest bosses in the whole HSR because you had skill point generation, AV advance, attack buff, and energy regions. And he basically did almost zero damage. But if you don't read and you accidentally mistime like the number of hits you have, then he'll be fucking annoying. So it kind of depends on individual. For me, I just don't really want to put this too high. Bottom of tier 0.5 because he reminds me of the Banana story, which is one of the worst in the entirety of HSR. So fuck Banana and fuck Reba. That's gonna be the bottom of tier 0.5. Negador, I like this. I think Negador's boss was very well. It kind of feels like a Hule, but for version 3. Except that Negador was the boss, I remember specifically, that filtered the HSR HP inflation LARPers to real HSR players. Because them fucking LARPers and drama farmers and whatever, they're like, oh my god, chat, look at Nicodore's HP inflation, right? This guy is literally unbeatable, 10,000 billion more HP than the previous boss, and HSR's HP inflation situation is going out of hand. When in reality, if anyone ever plays this fucking game, the moment you see what that mechanic does, one spear is 12.5% max HP. One war armor break is 10% max HP. And then every single time you hit him is 1% max HP. So if you can play to that mechanic, he was one of the easiest bosses to deal with, even with the HP inflation. So I think it's pretty good that we have these kind of like, it's kind of like, you know, like gatekeeping bosses, right? Bosses that can gatekeep the casuals from the LARPers and the LARPers from the real players. So I do appreciate Flame Reaver. I would want to place him tier 0, but I'm going to put him a little bit lower than tier 0 because he has two different modes of Flame Reaver. One is the one you can see in Epoch sometimes, where you get the extra turn clones, and the other one is the one that you fight normally with the double hits into the clone spawning, and then you have to go into phase 2. I really like Flame Reaver because he was a very zero cycle friendly boss. Because if you can clear out phase 1 fast enough, phase 2 is incredibly easy. So for anyone trying to zero cycle Flame Reaver, it was a good test of you with regards to your action values, as well as whether you have enough damage to deal the clones. It is not a free zero cycle, like for example the TV boss, because this guy's zero cycle is almost free, but you actually had to kind of know where you were doing. Also, it was a very good test to look at the Herta mains back then. Alright, if you were a D Herta main, it will see if you will know, do you have enough energy from your Tribi, Anexa, and D Herta to let go of the additional elements. So I think boss design wise, it is pretty cool. Unfortunately, if you did not like his mechanic, then he can be a little bit annoying. So I would place him at the top of 0.5. Unfortunately as well, D Herta nowadays is a little bit homeless against this guy, even though back then he was kind of made for D Herta, so times are gonna be changing a little bit, right? I'm not gonna say anything. Fuck this guy. Actually, you know what? Fuck this guy. Fuck everything he stands for. He should not exist. Kill that boy. Kill that boy. Right? The end. Okay, Aguila is really good though. I do like Aguila. Actually, I'll put Aguila above choosing here, right? Aguila was the boss with top 3 moments in Amphorius from a story perspective, because I never expected 3.3 to have a song like Proi Proi with a moment like the Aguila boss fight. Because I distinctively remember watching 3.3's live stream, I was like, oh my god, chat, this is a filler patch. There's nothing to do. It is a sustained banner. Nobody fucking cares. And like, it is what it is, right? But oh my god, the story was absolutely fucking insane. Which also was nice, because if I didn't enter into 3.3 with the expectation that it's gonna be a filler patch, then I wouldn't have been so shocked and enjoyed when that fight happened itself. Because I kept my expectations so low, I was very, very pleasantly surprised. So that is gonna be the boss fight story. For the actual anomaly arbitration, I liked this particular boss because we had to grind a lot on our free-to-play account to get ourselves the 3-star 2 cycle. I think it took us like what, 4 or 5 hours just to get a 3-star. So we definitely worked for it a lot, right? Learning a lot about our Mimo sprite management, right? When do we cast our casters? When do we save up on the Mimo sprite charge percentage? Every night with energy regeneration or speed boost. So that was a pretty fun little time. So Aguila is gonna be at tier 0.5. I will put this around Flame Reaver. It is the same photo. This is... okay, I'm gonna put this lower because it's Scott, and this boss ruined the fate story, so fuck Scott. Alright, tier 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Lygus is objectively my favorite boss I have ever played in HSR. No other boss have given me this amount of satisfaction and enjoyment because I am gambling on the double 100% ultimate charge, which led to some crazy showcases with so many different units. Lore-wise, he is also an incredible addition to the Amphoria story. I would say half of Amphoria's success is because of Lygus as a character for the allegory of the cave, which also has an absolute banger of a music. So if there was gonna be a Lygus tier above tier 0, I would put it as the Lygus tier, but I genuinely fucking enjoyed this particular boss fight. Also, I remember for Lygus, he was also the most difficult anomaly arbitration because he was the very first boss with anomaly arbitration. So back then, we didn't have the HPD. So if you did not use Mimo Slop with Hyacinth, you straight up cannot clear Lygus at E0. If you had more islands, maybe you could, but it was a super fucking difficult anomaly, and ever since that anomaly king, I think that way recognized that holy shit, this anomaly is way too hard, Lygus is way too hard, so we definitely will be toning down the difficulty for future anomalies. So Lygus was the first ever benchmark, and that was definitely a lasting impression for a lot of those clears back then, right? So yeah, exactly, he literally had Blade of the Ruined King, which dealt percentage max HP. So if your units did not use Hyacinth, you just died. You have no way to sustain yourself against his 5 billion goons having Blade of the Ruined King on every single one of them. Absolutely fucking ridiculous. So that's gonna be done over there. This guy was okay. It's alright. Probably around here. Alright. He was a little bit scary because he had the little scary face. But you just use a shooter and he kind of just died relatively quickly. No, not too much of an issue there. So, yeah, a little bit of a goofy team zone as well, but I don't really think there's too much to be discussed. Ooh. I mean, this was not even a boss fight, guys. If you remember this moment, this was where Kevin just stood there and not do anything while we slowly killed him, because he wanted to pass on into us for the final battle against Iron Tomb. But because he is Aishan Nation, I will just give him the ordinary tier 0. Right? This was not a boss fight, but it was just a, you know, a sad little moment before we put him to rest. Right? Alright, Iron Tomb. Okay, I legitimately don't really remember the Iron Tomb fight. I only remember Cyrene. Alright, she came back to life, she was a giantess, and then she let go of the bow. But the boss fight itself, I kinda already forgot. So I'll probably leave bro at like around bottom of tier 0. I need to see bro in like more endgame content, because he's literally just a story boss. Nothing more, right? So they have him at like a anomaly or something, then maybe I can remember a little bit more. Yeah, I don't know why he has not appeared in anomaly. A little bit strange. That is the same guy. So that's that. Ooh. I think he was better than Sam. You know what? Probably around here. Around here. Really shield for hyper carry, but not a very difficult boss, because the moment you broke the little buckles, he will be incapacitated for a very long time. So it might not be too good for 0 cycles, but generally you should have the team to essentially deal with him. In terms of story, he was the story with the Firefly, you know, Firefly got cancer and everything. I don't really care too much about Firefly, so mediocre, but combat-wise, I'll put it around this caliber, right? Okay, Sparksicon. You know what? I actually won't put Sparksicon in tier 2, even though this was a fucking annoying boss. Key reason being, I remember distinctively Sparksicon. I had an insanely good Fei Xiao showcase 0 cycle against Sparksicon, where we straight up skipped Sparksicon's whole phase 1 from the raw amount of damage we were able to do with Fei Xiao and Asheville. Right, so because of that core memory, she's gonna go up a little bit. But other than that, if you don't play Elation Slop, you will probably hate this boss. Like Bob. Bob absolutely detests this boss, so it is what it is. Also, I hate Sparksy. Right, she's just a little brat, just annoying as fuck, right? She's so short and I just really pretty, and I don't know why my channel has 2,000 Sparksy Sparkle emotes, so it is what I like Sparkle, but I hate Sparksy, so it is what it is, right? Okay, you know what? I'll put this better than Pollux. He was annoying, but not straight up unreasonable. Because as long as you can kill the little buggles that spawn, you could technically still deal with it. So more manageable, but still nonetheless a super fucking annoying boss. It was with literally God's intention that my free-to-play account could clear this 3 stars within like 20 minutes. It was legit like pure luck. At the very last hit of that 1%, I instantly took off 1 out of 2 from his low armor because we had the exact amount of HP that entered into phase 2. If not for that lucky ass hit, I probably would have been stuck for like 10,000 hours with my Mimo Slop team. So because of that, okay, you know what? Because of that luck, I'll put up a little bit, right? Because maybe Pom Pom loves me and I love Pom Pom, so that is gonna be tip top of tier 2. You know what, chat? Foul-ish as a boss, besides the little punchlines which serves zero purpose for the Elation mains, is really not super fucking annoying because the boss itself doesn't do that much damage. Right? Bro just summons flowers. Now that's pretty much it. So if you could get rid of the flowers and break out phase 1 fast enough, your survival pressure was not as scary, at least compared to, like, for example, Pollux as well as Pom Pom. So while this guy was kind of annoying, I don't think it's really that bad. I would say around the same caliber as Sparksicle. Sparksicle was a little bit more manageable, but I don't think it's as annoying as the buggles over here. So I will leave this as it is. For the story, I think that was quite nice, right? With the whole ascension, and then Blade went to come, and then like Sunday had a redemption arc. That was pretty nice. But other than that, I would just rate him at the bottom of tier 1, right? This is basically the same guy, right? Is that the same guy? Wait, who is this guy? Am I blind? Oh, that's okay, bro. I swear that looked like the same guy. Okay, so the triple Asapraman. I mean, I can't really rate this for now because he hasn't appeared in an endgame, so maybe he will come out in Anomaly Arbitration. But just for the story, he is the best boss fight in the entire game. Purely from a story perspective. But gameplay wise, I need to cook more because there are like a lot of interesting mechanics with Mr. Asapraman that I didn't even deep dive into. So when he eventually comes out for AA, we'll see what's up. But just from the story, tip top of tier 0. And with that, we are gonna come to the last boss of all, and that is gonna be the last boss above all, and that is the best of the best, right? With no explanation needed. Alright, let's just be real, guys, right? Fei Xiao has the interesting mechanic of turning one of your units into a whole ass werewolf. Very nice ultimate, very nice music, very nice lore moment, right? Super interesting Apoc Shadows fight, very nice things, the greatest nicest in the history of nice. And we are gonna come to the end of our HSR boss tier list in 2026. I have yapped on for way too long. I am gonna let you guys decide on what this boss is gonna be like. Let me just HSR boss tier list 2026. Peace, love, and happiness. And the word of the day is, oh, there's no Graphia. Oh, if I have to rank Graphia, around bottom of tier 0.5 to tier 1. Yes, right. Join Discord, use code BO, your 10% gamers up. All the best for a gacha pools. I'll see you guys next time. Hey.